everybody. It's Holy Week for Christians, Passover for the Jewish religion. Christians reflect on the sublime love of Christ for mankind, and ascertain how they might live better in imitation of Christ, taking the cup of Gethsemane in this life. Those of the other great Abrahamic religion in celebration this week, the Jews, celebrate their freedom from horrific conditions of slavery. These reflections allow us to contemplate the divine, the things that really matter. Lydia LaRouche used to point all the time to an Abner Dean cartoon in the New Yorker magazine of old, wherein a man sits up in his coffin as it is being carried out of the church and says, "I wonder what that was all about." Those who are now trying to panic Americans and make them fearful about the gyrations of Wall Street or the bond market are also determined to leave us in this life in the same position as the man in the Dean cartoon, not having fulfilled and exercised the talent that God gave us, wondering what that was all about. Now, Donald Trump is attempting to rebuild the once dominant U.S. economy almost from scratch, from the crashed and dilapidated state Biden left it. The people who have profited massively from the practical enslavement of the American working and middle classes are determined to stop him and preserve their power. Trump is simultaneously destroying the deep state propaganda and policing apparatus, which allowed them to retain their power. The present strategic dynamic is as simple as that in a nutshell. I'm Barbara Boyd, and this is your Monday Brief. After 1971, when Nixon, at the advice of George Shultz and the British, took the dollar off the gold reserve standard and destroyed stable monetary practices, and the birth at the same time of so-called post-industrial society, Americans were constantly assaulted with the lie that it was no longer necessary to produce anything for ourselves. Now we could just be consumers in a service society operating under a world government in which we would be rewarded for being the world's policeman. We undertook endless wars on behalf of the so-called post-war rules-based order, and were rewarded with mounds of debt and the hatred of the victims of what were fundamentally economic and raw materials wars. The deaths of our population caused by depression, drugs, and despair soared, while the very rich convinced themselves that they had found the recipe for success in walled-off communities where the latest acts of hedonism filled their days. The war in Ukraine, which Trump is trying to end now, is exemplary of the post-war order, which Trump is taking apart after millions have been killed, yet again, absolutely needlessly. The driving force of that war is the long-term British goal of controlling the riches of Eurasia, which means that Russia has to be gotten out of the way. The concession to the United States for fighting it is that we were supposed to control the gas lines which Russia built through Ukraine to carry gas for all of Europe. West Texas and other U.S. gas was supposed to fill those lines now at a huge profit to liquefied natural gas producers instead of the Russian Gazprom product. An additional concession, of course, went to the Biden family in the form of millions in kickbacks, which is why they were protected from the obvious by both the U.S. and the British intelligence community. I might add that those now wailing so loud about what Trump is trying to accomplish here are probably also, enriched by the same kickback scheme. The permanent state of warfare in the Middle East is equally a British imperial project and has been for centuries. Trump is also determined to solve that by new deals with Iran, and there were very productive talks on both sides over the weekend. A revived Abraham Accords for Middle East development is very much on the table, and hopefully it will succeed. Now, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, Malcolm X remarked the chickens had come home to roost much sooner than JFK had expected. The lying establishment press of the time distorted that and added whole sentences to it to make it seem that Malcolm was happy about the assassination. Public outrage followed, of course. But as Malcolm explained, the climate of hatred in the country more broadly had resulted in the president being killed, the chickens coming home to roost. Something like that hatred is being ginned up against Trump now. Polling shows that some 50% of leftists now think it is acceptable to assassinate Donald Trump. That's the climate in which my civil liberties friends complain about the tough measures Trump is taking against criminals and terrorists. So it is imperative now that the Trump appointees in key agencies like the CIA, FBI, and State Department fully pinpoint what happened in these two previous assassination attempts and the entire coup against Trump dating from 2015 and thoroughly expose it. The Crossfire Hurricane files were only a start. The RFK Sr. and Martin Luther King assassination files will show a pattern. I'll be posting about that soon on the website, but it's imperative now that we move on this threat and fully expose it. When Franklin Roosevelt set out to recover this country from the degradation and suffering of the Great Depression, he said two things that made a big impression on me. The first was that he was proud that Wall Street and J.P. Morgan hated him. Donald Trump said something very similar in a speech to the Republican Congressional Committee last week. He said, and I quote, "I'm proud to be the president of the workers, not the outsourcers. The president who stands up for Main Street, not Wall Street, who protects the middle class, not the political class, and who defends America, not trade cheaters all over the globe." The president has undertaken to rebuild this economy for the working and middle classes. He really only has a short time to set this massive transformation on a solid course. The other thing FDR said is that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. My dad, who loved FDR, used to repeat that to me all the time when I was a kid. To him, it was the biggest instruction you could have in life. The midterms loom in 2026, at which time Trump could be made a very lame duck if the Democrats retake the Congress. And the only weapon they really have to wield is hatred and fear and the resulting smallness of mind of citizens who succumb to it. Their fear is that Trump's economic transformation will show them to be fools who almost succeeded in enslaving the American people by convincing them that they were consumers, not the proud inventors, producers, and frontiersmen, which is our heritage. Trump's takedown of the security state used to brainwash and intimidate the population and wage the endless wars which caused their victims to hate this country will expose many of our most established leaders to criminal prosecution for outright sedition against the United States. But, and this is a big but, the president can only fully succeed if we show up, if we abandon the mindset of underlings to people who we conceive as somehow above us, the experts. We have to take the cup of Gethsemane now on behalf of our fellow men and women and emulate the sacrifice the president himself is making and has made for this nation. That's what being a citizen is about. That's what our forefathers did in founding the greatest nation on earth. We have to walk now in their footsteps, thinking big like them and our current president, and creating this country's greatness yet again. We need to make the essentials of life again here by bringing the supply chains home, no matter what Wall Street or China or the EU say about it. We have to invent the economy of the future by colonizing the moon and Mars and perfecting advanced nuclear and fusion power. We have to make AI our servant for the mundane tasks so that we can fully employ our creative abilities in making new discoveries about the universe in which we live. That's what Trump is about. All the media and Democrats and oligarchs opposing him right now are the emotional equivalent of the cranky, rich old people screaming at the playful and happy children to get off their grass. Bob Ingram told everyone what you need to know about tariffs and William McKinley, Donald Trump's favorite president, in his class on Saturday night. It will be up on the Promethean Action website today, and it is a must-watch for you. Susan Kokinda will be with you on Wednesday for the midweek brief, and I'll see you again on Saturday to wrap the developments of the week. If you enjoy these updates, I really do like you telling me that in your comments, but you can make me really happy by going to Prom Action and becoming a member of our community. You'll be rewarded with the tools and knowledge you need to master the profound tasks just ahead. And the contributions you make, in whatever amount, keep these updates going. Thanks so much for listening. Happy Easter and Passover to all.
Thanks for watching. Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at prometheanaction.com.